U.S. officials confirmed another round of strikes Wednesday, targeting Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. This comes just hours after the militant group attacked a U.S.-owned commercial ship in the Gulf of Aden. Last week, the United States and its allies launched the first round of missile strikes against the Houthis for its attacks in the Red Sea. The Houthis support Gaza and Palestinians in the Israel-Hamas war and say they are targeting ships they believe are linked to Israel. The Biden administration also on Wednesday redesignated the group as global terrorists. In a statement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, in part, quote, "This designation seeks to promote accountability for the group's terrorist activities. If the Houthis cease their attacks, the United States will reevaluate this designation." For more on this, let's bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis. Olivia, let's start with something that President Biden said last week after that Allied strike on the Houthis in the Red Sea.
It's irrelevant whether they're designated. We've put together a group of nations that are going to say that if they continue to act and behave as they do, we'll respond.
So what changed in the past few days? Is the designation irrelevant, or will it actually make a difference? And if so, what kind of difference?
Sure, John. I mean, I think in this case, specifically involving the Houthis, the truth has to lie somewhere in the middle, and probably, if we're being honest, more toward the irrelevant side of the ledger for a few reasons. One is that the type of designation that was announced today, the specially designated global terrorist label, carries with it some tools to disrupt financial support for the Houthis, which could be assets or accounts in the U.S. or access to U.S. institutions, which of course makes you wonder just how many U.S.-based assets or accounts do the Houthis currently have. I think you can assume not that many. Two is that a much more effective deterrence tool, and by that I mean targeted missile strikes, has already been deployed here. And there have been questions raised that you're raising now about their effect, considering that Houthi activities there in the Red Sea are pretty much unabated. And three, I think, has to do with the U.S.'s own goals here, which is clearly to take some action, even largely symbolic action against Houthi aggression, without adding kindling to this very hot tinderbox of a conflict in the region. So that it may be that this notional difference is all they were really going for.
And I understand there's another declaration. They could have declared the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, or FTO. What does that designation? What's the difference with that designation, and why didn't they use it?
Sure. Well, the administration's answer to this question today is that this sort of gentler designation, the SDGT designation, was made out of consideration for the really dire humanitarian situation in Yemen, which they argue could have been further adversely affected if they had made an FTO, foreign terrorist organization designation. That's because the FTO label carries with it penalties for anyone who provides or tries to provide material support, is the text, to a designated group, which, you know, the argument goes could have a chilling effect on aid groups who may become wary of triggering any sanctions and therefore stop sending aid to Yemeni civilians. You know, critics of the administration are saying that not doing the FTO makes this a half measure that, you know, in oblique fashion appeases Iran, which is, of course, the Houthis' principal backer. But what the administration, I think, is signaling here is that it's much more sensitive to the humanitarian situation, not only in Gaza, but obviously now here in Yemen. And so exacerbating that one is likely that what they were more sensitive here and more keen to avoid being criticized for.
You mentioned Iran. What's the assessment of Iran's, you know, there's this strange relationship with the Houthis, and then, of course, there's Iran's relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon. What's the assessment of what Iran's up to here, and how much of what we're seeing at the moment is Iran's puppeteering hand, or merely the behavior of groups that Iran just happens to support?
Sure. I think there are a lot of questions about Iran's ultimate intent here. A lot of intelligence analysts would like the answer to that question. I think the general view from those I've spoken to is that these recent strikes that Iran has taken in Iraq and in Pakistan, those are more of a retribution for the attacks that they suffered by ISIS earlier this year. And that's instead of this sort of broader message that they're going to more fulsomely enter this conflict. In fact, the sources I've spoken to about the indirect messages that are being sent from Iran indicate that what they're getting back is a reluctance on the part of Tehran to sort of more broadly step into this conflict. I think what's going to be key here is what, if any, response you see specifically from Pakistan, because of what it is, a nuclear power, because of what it needs to defend its sovereignty. And when you have the likes of China, which issued a statement today calling for peace and stability from the likes of Iran and Pakistan, you know that the situation is pretty volatile, John.
Extremely helpful. Thank you. Olivia Gazis in Washington. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says one way to combat the Houthis in Yemen is to create a clear pathway to a Palestinian state. Blinken reiterated this Wednesday at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He says the creation of a Palestinian state would help unify the Middle East. Blinken argues the move would also help ensure Israel's future security in the region and isolate its biggest threat, Iran, and its associated militant groups. But senior administration officials say Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected any post-war proposal that allows for a Palestinian state.